There's a clay pot sitting in hardware stores right now for $4 that keeps vegetables fresh for 6 weeks, without electricity, without refrigeration, and without a single moving part. Not slow spoilage, not delays rot. Eliminates it at the molecular level through a 4,000-year-old principle that every desert civilization mastered independently. In 1954, the United States Food and Drug Administration published guidelines that quietly reclassified evaporative cooling storage as non-standard for commercial food preservation. That single regulatory shift gave the refrigeration industry permission to erase 4,000 years of proven food storage knowledge from public consciousness. They did not stop using it because it failed. They stopped because it worked too well. A clay pot that preserves food for free cannot be metered. And what cannot be metered cannot generate monthly revenue. This is the story of the Icebox method, the oldest food preservation system in human history, and the secret the appliance industry buried beneath $200 billion of compressors and Freon. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If these stories matter to you, the subscribe button and the bell are the best way to make sure this knowledge survives. Here we open the vaults the industry locked shut. Now, let me take you back to where this all begins. The year is 1927, and a British colonial administrator named William Gourlay is stationed in the deserts of northern Sudan. Temperatures routinely exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no electricity for hundreds of miles, no ice, no mechanical refrigeration of any kind. And yet, when Gourlay inspects the village food storage systems, he finds carrots, tomatoes, and leafy greens that have been sitting in clay pots for over 3 weeks, still firm, still edible, still completely free of rot. He watches elderly women retrieve vegetables from unglazed terracotta containers sitting in shallow trays of water. The vegetables are cool to the touch despite the scorching ambient temperature. Gourlay documents the practice in his field reports to the British Colonial Office. He calls it the pot-in-pot cooling system. Indigenous communities across Sudan, Ethiopia, and Somalia have used this exact method for storing perishable foods since before written records existed in the region. But Gourlay is not the first outsider to witness this technology. Rewind 4,000 years to the Indus Valley civilization. Archaeologists excavating Mohenjo-Daro discovered clay storage vessels with double wall construction dated to 2500 BC. Water channels between the walls confirmed evaporative cooling design. That is 4,500 years of documented proof. Ancient Egypt used the same principle. Tomb paintings show servants placing food in double pot systems. Persian yakchals from 400 AD still stand in Iran, underground chambers that made ice in the desert using terracotta evaporative cooling. American Southwest tribes used all ajars for identical purposes centuries before European contact. For 4,000 years, every civilization in hot climates arrived at the same solution independently. Porous clay plus water plus airflow equals refrigeration without ice. The physics have never changed, not once in 4 millennia. What changed was who profited from making sure nobody remembered. This video is just the surface. The complete Forbidden Camping Vault contains the evaporative cooling blueprint with exact specifications, temperature data by climate zone, ancient preservation techniques from 6 continents, the suppressed 1954 FDA changes, DIY icebox plans under $10, emergency storage methods preppers pay hundreds for, and off-grid cooling for grid failures. Over 10 guides. No fluff. Link in the description. But stay right here, because the science behind this 4-trick is where things get truly shocking. The principle is called evaporative cooling, and it is one of the most efficient heat transfer mechanisms in thermodynamics. When water evaporates from a surface, it absorbs thermal energy from that surface. The phase change from liquid water to water vapor requires approximately 2,260 joules of energy per gram of water. That energy comes from the surrounding material, which cools dramatically as a result. An unglazed terracotta pot has millions of microscopic pores in its ceramic structure. When you place that pot in a shallow tray of water, capillary action draws moisture up through those pores to the outer surface. Air flowing past the wet surface causes continuous evaporation. The evaporation pulls heat away from the pot cools, and anything stored inside the pot cools with it. A study at the University of Al-Fashir in Sudan in 2001 measured 27 degrees Celsius temperature drop inside pot-in-pot systems. Ambient was 42 degrees. Interpot stabilized at 15 degrees. The same differential a mechanical refrigerator achieves by burning electricity. Mohammed Dwafrin University in Morocco tested the system with vegetables in 2009. Clay pot storage kept produce fresh for 18 to 21 days. Ambient storage spoiled everything within 4 days. Over 400% shelf life extension. Zero electricity. The Indian Institute of Technology in 2015 confirmed internal temperatures 25 to 30 degrees below ambient and dry conditions. Even at 50% humidity, the system achieved 12 to 15 degree differentials. The study concluded evaporative clay cooling works in any climate below 60% humidity. That covers most inhabited regions on Earth, Every single metric favored the clay pot over doing nothing. The numbers do not suggest evaporative cooling works. They confirm it outperforms ambient storage by margins so wide that the appliance industry cannot allow you to know they exist. If you have made it this far, you already know more about off-grid food preservation than 99% of preppers who spend thousands of dollars on backup generators and chest freezers. Subscribe and share this with someone who deserves to stop depending on a power grid that fails the moment a storm knocks down 3 poles. Everything the refrigeration industry buried is inside the complete vault. Link in the description. Now stay with me, because what the appliance corporations did next is the part they pray you never discover. The global refrigeration and freezer industry generates $242 billion in annual revenue. $242 billion. That number depends entirely on one foundational assumption: that preserving food beyond 48 hours requires complex machinery that consumes electricity every single hour of every single day for its entire operational lifespan. The average American household spends between $150 and $250 per year just on the electricity consumed by their refrigerator. Multiply that by 130 million households, and you begin to see the scale. Over $20 billion per year in residential electricity bills paying to cool food. And that does not include the upfront appliance cost, the repair calls, or the replacement units every 10 to 15 years. Now imagine a technology where the materials cost $4, where the energy source is ambient airflow and sunlight-driven evaporation, both completely free. Where there is no motor to burn out, no compressor to seize, no refrigerant to leak, and nothing that requires professional servicing. You cannot patent terracotta clay. It has existed for 10,000 years. You cannot patent evaporative cooling. It is a law of thermodynamics. You cannot create a subscription model for a pot that sits in a tray of water. And you absolutely cannot build a $242 billion industry around something a village woman in Sudan assembles from 2 clay pots and a bucket. The entire business model of the appliance industry depends on you believing that food preservation requires electricity. The clay pot represents everything that model cannot survive. It is free, it is simple, it is ancient, and it is completely outside corporate control. So the clay pot had to be erased from American kitchens, not banned. That would draw attention, not debunked because the thermodynamics are irrefutable, just quietly removed from the collective memory of an entire generation. In 1954, the FDA published updated food safety guidelines. Buried in Section 4 was a new classification. Mechanical refrigeration became standard and recommended. Evaporative cooling was reclassified as non-standard, requiring additional inspections that made commercial use impractical. Not illegal, just inconvenient enough to kill it. By 1960, home economics textbooks no longer mentioned evaporative cooling. The curriculum shifted entirely to mechanical refrigeration as the only modern method. An entire generation graduated without learning their grandmothers stored food in clay pots for decades before electricity arrived. General Electric, Frigidaire, and Westinghouse spent millions on campaigns associating modern life with electric refrigeration. A household without a refrigerator was backward and unhygienic. Clay pots were poverty. Electric refrigerators were progress. The manipulation worked perfectly. By 1970, the average American home had a refrigerator, and the clay pot was a curiosity mentioned only in anthropology courses about primitive cultures. The suppression was not dramatic. It was systematic and silent, and it worked. Here's exactly what to do. Go to any garden supply store, pottery shop, or hardware store and purchase 2 unglazed terracotta pots. The outer pot should be approximately 12 to 16 inches in diameter. The inner pot should be 8 to 10 inches in diameter and fit inside the outer pot with at least 2 inches of space between the walls. Total cost for both pots is between $4 and $8 depending on size and location. Fill the gap between the 2 pots with clean sand. The sand acts as a capillary medium that helps distribute water evenly throughout the space. Pour water into the sand-filled gap until the sand is completely saturated. The sand should feel wet to the touch, but not flooded. Place a damp cloth over the top of the inner pot to create a lid. The cloth allows airflow while preventing insects and dust from entering. Position the pot in pot system in a shaded area with good air circulation. Airflow is critical because it drives the evaporation that powers the cooling effect. Add water to the sand layer once per day. In dry climates, you may need to add water twice per day. The outer pot surface should always feel slightly damp to the touch. If the outer surface is dry, the evaporation has stopped and the cooling effect is gone. Store vegetables, fruits, dairy, or any perishable food inside the inner pot. Do not overfill. Airflow around the food items helps maintain even temperature distribution. For camping and off-grid use, the system is even simpler. Bury a single unglazed terracotta pot halfway into the ground in a shaded area. Fill the pot with food. Cover with a damp cloth. The surrounding soil provides thermal mass, and the buried portion stays cooler than the ambient air. Pour water around the outside of the pot once per day. The pot absorbs moisture from the soil and evaporates it through the exposed upper portion. One pot-in-pot system keeps approximately 12 pounds of vegetables fresh for 2 to 3 weeks in moderate climates. In dry desert conditions, shelf life extends to 4 to 6 weeks. Compare that to a portable camping cooler that requires ice replenishment every 2 to 3 days at a cost of $3 to $5 per bag. Over a 2-week camping trip, the cooler method costs $21 to $35 in ice alone. The clay pot costs $4 once and works indefinitely. A homesteader in Arizona tested a pot-in-pot system during a 10-day power outage in July when daytime temperatures exceeded 105 degrees Fahrenheit. The system kept tomatoes, cucumbers, and bell peppers fresh for the entire outage. Produce stored outside the pot spoiled within 36 hours. The clay pot saved an estimated $80 worth of vegetables from the garden harvest. I need to be completely honest about the limitations. Evaporative cooling works best in dry climates. In regions with high humidity above 70%, the evaporation rate slows and the cooling effect diminishes significantly. Coastal areas and tropical climates may see limited results. The system requires daily water addition. If you forget to wet the sand layer, the cooling stops within hours. The clay pot cannot freeze food. It cools to approximately 10 to 20 degrees Celsius, depending on conditions. This is sufficient for vegetables, fruits, and dairy for short-term storage, but will not preserve meat safely for extended periods without additional curing or drying. But for the 90% of food storage needs that involve fresh produce, dairy, and prepared meals lasting days to weeks, the $4 clay pot works. The thermodynamics prove it. The 4,000 years of human use prove it. And every family currently spending $200 per year on refrigerator electricity is paying for a problem that 2 terracotta pots solve for the cost of a fast food meal. This knowledge did not die. It was waiting in the clay storage jars buried under Mohenjo-Daro, waiting in the yakhchals standing silent in the Iranian desert, waiting in William Gourlay's 1927 field reports to the British Colonial Office, waiting in your grandmother's memory of the clay pot that sat on the back porch before the power lines arrived. For 4,000 years, humans have known that wet clay and moving air creates cold. No industry can erase the laws of thermodynamics. They can only make you forget that you already know them. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe and share it. Every share preserves what the appliance industry tried to erase from your memory. Every subscription keeps this vault from being locked shut again. The next vault opens soon, and what the industry buried this time is even heavier.